We are live on Art Responders. That means we are with you who are just joining us. Thank you so much for being here today. If you're just hopping in, welcome. We're very, 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 very excited about today's episode. On a personal level, probably my most excited I've been. No pressure to our guest to fulfill my excitement. But this is a really fun and meaningful show for us. If you're just hopping in, want to get a sense of where you're calling in from on the chat, and also, have you met this man before? Have you heard Chris Garcia speak in any context? I'm just curious your familiarity with Chris, our featured guest this evening. Hi, Lloyd in Long Island. Welcome. All right, we have some past listeners. Oh, wow, we've got a lot of folks coming in. Okay, so people are not turned off by having heard you before.
Oh, that's good.
Although we have a lot of people who've never heard of you, so that's really good. This is going to be
good.
a great time. Hi in Tennessee and Baltimore. I can't even this whole list.
Tucson. Oh, cool. Awesome. All over.
Fabulous.
Rachel, thanks for listening to Scattered. Oh, that's so cool. Hello, New York, Seattle, Boston. Wow. Cleveland.
Okay, fabulous. We have folks from across the country and across the world. You are with us at Reimagine, and we're going to get started. Thanks for finding where the chat is, everyone. So my name is Brad. I am your host this evening, the founder of Reimagine. Reimagine is a nonprofit organization, and we focus really on the hardest elements of the human experience. We think about death and dying and grief and caregiving and serious illness, but we do so with the idea that if we face these hard things, we might actually end up living our lives more fully. That if we do that, we can celebrate the people who matter most and take the actions in our life that make our life and this life worth it all. So thank you for being here and creating this space with us for these real conversations and for this special event. This event that you're part of now is part of a larger effort that we're involved in called Reimagine Life, Loss, and Love. It's our ongoing virtual festival during COVID-19, where we've had 600 plus events now over the last 2.5 months to provide these spaces for these types of conversations. And thank you so much for being here. You're joining 30,000 other registrants who have stepped into wanting to be part of these types of conversations. So just really appreciate your support and your involvement in making all this possible. I want to give a major shout out to all of our festival sponsors. As a nonprofit, it's really the support from both the sponsors and then from the individual donors, all of you who contributed. Thank you so much. Tonight, we have deep thanks. We like to acknowledge the generosity of an organization called The Memories for underwriting this work. The Memories is an online alternative to traditional obituaries that enables family and friends to share photos, quotes, memories, and condolences for loved ones who have passed away. And to offer their support during this time, The Memories has made all life stories free to post right now. So for more information on creating a free life story, you can visit thememories.com. I also want to take a minute to acknowledge CTAC. This series, Art Responders, is co-presented by CTAC, the Coalition to Transform Advanced Care, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan advocacy organization dedicated to the ideal that all Americans with advanced illness receive comprehensive, high-quality, person and family-centered care consistent with their goals and values, and that honors their dignity. Paying attention to values, what matters most, these are conversations that Reimagine really supports and believes that everyone should be honored in this way. So thank you to CTAC. All right, so to get us situated, this is my colleague Dara's cats. We used to have her face on this slide, but we realized that the cats, I'm not going to compare her cats to her face, but they're both appealing The cats here are letting us know some Zoom skills that you probably have already picked up. But for this show, we're going to have our microphones off unless there's some moment at the very end where we can all turn our mics on and say goodbye to one another. Please keep your cameras on if possible, because it's great to see your smiling faces, especially since comedy will be part of this. So seeing laughter out there is requested if possible. And then for this show, if you do have any comments or questions specifically for Chris, so I'm not the one asking all the questions, I'll be able to address and turn to Chris with some of your questions if you have any that come up during this episode. All right, so and then, of course, if you have any other additional questions, you can chat us and we can answer, or you can email us at hello@letsreimagine.org, and we have someone there who can address your questions. I also want to make sure that we are recording this beautiful episode for posterity, so that's good. And now we get to this part of the introduction where we do an intention to set the space. A lot of Chris's comedy that I've experienced to date does have things to do with his family. And so I saw that my mom actually was in the waiting room. I don't know if Mom, Karen, Wolf, if you're here, but I thought I would call on my mom to read today's intention to everybody. We read this intention to set the space. So if someone can find my mom and unmute her, that would be amazing.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, so this is my mom, Karen. Chris, meet my mom.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, Chris.
How's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. I think I may have met you in San Francisco.
Exactly, yes.
Good to see you. I hope you're well.
Thank you. You too. I'm excited to be here and to have you join us today.
Hit it, Mom.
Okay.
Sorry. Go for it.
There is no life without death, no love without loss. They are in constant complementary motion. In the face of distance, illness, racism, and isolation, we are here together, reimagining a changed world, kinder, slower, more just. We are reimagining the giving and receiving of love, the cycles of loss and new beginnings, and what it means to be fully alive. We are here.
Thanks, Mom. That's my mom, everyone, and I'm just glad you're here to hear this, some of the poignant, sweet things that we'll be sharing. Thanks again for setting that intention for us today, Mom.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
And now, without further ado, I want to set up this episode. So Art Responders is a series we've been hosting with a diverse mix of musicians, artists, comics, and writers who are each grappling with the themes of loss, grief, and death, and really processing what it means to be human in this moment. And Art Responders really provides us with this opportunity to come together to be in conversation around or with people that have used their own voice, their own art form to express themselves and grapple with what we're all facing in this time. And I honestly can't think of anyone I'm more excited to introduce around this theme than today's guest, Chris Garcia. So Chris is a comedian. He's a television writer, actor, and podcaster from LA. He used to live in the Bay Area. You may have seen him tell his jokes on his very own half-hour special on Comedy Central. He's been on The Late Show with James Corden, This Is Not Happening, a number of other incredible shows that you've likely heard of. Chris was named a new face at the 2016 Montreal Just for Laughs Comedy Festival and has been called a comedian you should and will know by Vulture. He has written for Comedy Central, Adult Swim, Broadway Video, and is currently writing and acting on Mr. Iglesias, which is on Netflix. He's been a guest on memorable podcast episodes of This American Life, Two Dope Queens, and he has this incredible podcast called Scattered, which was named one of the 10 best podcasts of 2019 by Time Magazine. He's also shared the stage at Reimagine as really one of our most loved, revered, favorite guests at each of the festivals that we've hosted to date. And so without further ado, I want to welcome Chris.
Well, thanks, Brad. Good to see you. Thanks for that very nice introduction. How are you? Doing good? I hope you're great.
Yeah, I'm hanging in there. And very, as I mentioned, good to be here today. I want to let everyone know what we're going to do together. Well, Chris is a funny man. I mean, I think at least when I've seen him to date, and so we're just going to be in conversation. He's going to weave in some comedy and we're going to just get a sense of what's going on in his life and talk about these themes that we mentioned off the top. And I apologize up front for, I don't know if you get this, Chris, from other people. And I was mentioning this when you were off screen beforehand, that for some reason when I see you, I end up trying to be funny myself. It just like, I know and Gabrielle suggested that's a dangerous trap because you're a professional. So I'm going to try to tone my own desire to be funny back.
It's a fool's errand. There's really no point for you to do this, Brad. You know, just stay straight and just ask the questions, okay? Leave the comedy to me, Brad. No, I'm just kidding. Just be yourself. You're gonna do great, kid.
All right, thanks. No, that's good. So Chris, why are you here? Let's just start there. Why do you think you're on this particular, reimagine? Why are we reimagining the end of life with you? What is it about your life that brings you to this conversation?
Well, I think it's probably because of how I've spoken about death in the past and my material surrounding my father's life and death through my stand-up and through my podcast, Scattered, that just concluded at the end of last year. If I had to take a wild guess, I would say that's probably it. But I'm kind of known for being able to talk about sad stuff in a new perspective. And I think that is something that comes from my family. And my mom and father, they're very funny. They're refugees from Cuba and they've been through a lot. And they're just have a funny way of looking in the world, which I'm very grateful to have inherited that.
So why don't we start then with, your background a little bit, just to give people some context. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your mom?
My mom is, my mom's 4'8". First of all, I like to joke that she's so small, she looks far away. She should have a little sign on her that says Cubans in the mirror may be closer than they appear. And she is tiny, but she has a very big personality. And she's just always very funny. She makes fun of how I dress. She doesn't like it. She says I look goofy. She says I look like a teacher that nobody respects and that I should dress a little tougher, like a traditional Cuban man. But she's just, she's the queen of gallows humor. For example, my father who passed away, my father passed away 3 years ago. And recently she told me, she was like, I'm pretty sure your dad invented coronavirus, so I couldn't go outside and meet a new boyfriend. So that's the type of things that she'll say. It was just their 56th wedding anniversary on Saturday, actually. That was it. And jokingly, I was like, Mom, you think you'll ever find a new guy? And she's like, Papi told me that if I found a new man, that he would haunt me, that he would, in the middle of the night, he would pull on my toes and let me know that he was there watching. And so she was like, I'm good on that. So she's just funny in any situation. And she's a really lovely woman and a really strong lady. But she and my dad met as teenagers. They were literally the boy and girl next door in Cuba when they were in their teens, and then got married in their early 20s. Yeah. And
so what brought them to the United States?
Have you heard of a regime? Yeah, they were living under Castro and having a tough time. They were born in 42 and 45, I believe. And so Castro took over in 59 and things were really tough in those first 10 years. And my dad actually wanted to leave Cuba, and when he asked for papers to leave the country in the late 60s, they said no, and they made him work in a Cuban sugarcane camp, in a work camp. So my mom and dad had been married for just a couple of years. They had my sister, who was a baby at the time, and my dad had 12 hours to get his affairs in order and go to, he didn't know where he was going, and he worked in a like a plantation situation, pulling sugarcane for over a year. And then luckily he made it out alive. And then after that, they, the big idea was to come to the United States, but there was no, they couldn't do it at the time. So my dad fled from Cuba to Spain, and he had to leave my mom and my sister behind again. And, it was really tough because when my dad got out of the sugarcane camp, he was fed spoiled water and spoiled food, and he was so malnourished and so skinny when he left the camp and he returned home. My sister, who was a kid at the time, opened the door and said, "Mommy, there's a man at the door." So like he was unrecognizable when he returned from the sugarcane camp. But my mom, she visited him as much as possible. She likes to joke that when she would visit, they would rush into the sugarcane plantation and have a quickie from time to time, which my mom cannot. She cannot. My mom's very raw, and maybe it's something other people have to get used to. But they're just madly in love, and they stuck through that situation. And even my dad having to go to Spain for another year separately, they withstood that. And eventually, my mom and sister moved to Spain, and they were reunited. But the big plan was for them to come to the United States so my dad could work in aerospace, because he was a brilliant engineer type. He was a machinist. And so they moved to the United States in like the mid 70s, and I was born a couple years later.
And so, I know that a lot of your stories that I've heard have involved your parents and your dad in your life. What when you reflect back on your dad, what did you love most about him?
Oh man, I'm getting choked up. I'd say that he was a cheerleader, and he was very enthusiastic, and he hated cynicism. He said to be cynical is to be a loser, which he was just like, he just believed in, he was relentless with his love for his family and his friends. And he was never ashamed to show his feelings or to root for the underdog, which I think is a really beautiful thing to do, especially these days, is to really root for your fellow man and just be expressive with your love, and just be kind and just root for your friends, like my dad just really something, I think it's very American. I don't know how American it is now, but just to be like, to really go for it and really inspire others to go for it too. And whatever you wanted to do. And that's just a really beautiful thing to share, That's probably one of my favorite things.
Can you give us an example of how he manifested in your life?
Sure. Oh, well, I think my dad was just always, my parents sacrificed so much. They went to great lengths just for me to have a better life, like any immigrant parents, right? So I grew up in Inglewood, where the schools at the time were not good because they weren't well funded. But my dad he came to the United States so I could have a good education, right? So the way they figured out to get me to go to a good school is that we lied about where we lived so I can go to a Catholic school in a nice neighborhood. But in order to do that, we had to be baptized in being Catholic, and we're not Catholic, right? So we went to this baptism process for me to go to this school, and the priest was like, so where are the godparents? Because it was just me and my dad and my mom. And my dad was like, I'll be right back. And my dad came back 20 minutes later with my 18-year-old sister and our 50-year-old family mechanic. And my dad was like, okay, well, this is Laura, and it's a May-December relationship. But anyway, the godparents are here. And so like, we did that. And then I just remember this time where I was in second grade, and when you're a little kid, that I knew the situation. I knew we were not from this place, and it was a lot for me to like harbor this kind of secret that I didn't live in this neighborhood. But my parents, they worked really hard. My dad we lived in Inglewood. He worked in Canoga Park, which back and forth, that's probably 2 hours every direction. And my mom worked all day, so they were always kind of late to pick me up. And this nun, Sister Perpetua, was sick of, like she was just sick of waiting for my parents to pick me up. And she was like, young man, where are your parents? I was like, I'm pretty sure they're home. And she was like, I'm going to drive you home. And so she went into the office and got my address, my fake address, right? And she was like, I'm just going to drive you straight to this place. And I'm just like, and we got in this car. It was the 80s, so I guess you're allowed to do stuff like that. I don't know what the rules were. But we're driving, and we get to this house, and I'm like, wow, this house is the other Garcias are doing way better than we are. This is really nice. Wow, I should just live with this family. Then they were like straight up eating dinner in the window and stuff. And I remember, and she was like, here you are. And I was like, oh, we moved. And I don't know, I don't remember how to get, I'll figure it out. I'll take you to our new place. So I led this nun on a wild goose chase. I was just like, make a left, make a right at LAX, make another left. And then she's like, where are you taking me? And I was like, I usually just lay down in the back of the car and just kind of close my eyes when my parents drive. So I have no idea really how to get there. And she was so mad, and she drove back to school, and my parents were waiting on like on the front steps of the school, just worried sick. And I ran up to him real quick, and I was like, Mami, papi, esta monja, creía que los otros, dije, blah, blah, blah. I just like quickly explained the story. And my dad I remember he put his arm around me in Spanish. He was like, you're going to make it in this country. I think you have what it takes. And so it was just like that relentless, is like, you can do it, whatever it takes, man. And it was just like that kind of mentality. And I don't know, just a very, I mean, my dad didn't really teach me to lie. That sounds like it's a point of the story, but he just taught me to go for it. And he was just always rooting for me. And he really wanted me to be good at math and science. And I just wasn't. Like, I couldn't even do Legos. I could make like basically a chimney, and that was it. And I remember the science fair was coming up. And for my dad, that was like so important. Like, my parents wanted me to be an astronaut when I was an adult, and I couldn't even do basic math. And I think my parents forgot that they're the hardworking immigrants. Like, I'm the American. Like, my dream is to get hit by a Walmart truck and get paid for the rest of my life. Like, I'm not trying to go to space or anything. And so, but my dad, it was very important for me to be good at school. And so we had a science fair coming up, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And it was right around the time of the Exxon Valdez oil spill. And my dad was like, well, let's do something topical from the headlines. And so we showed up. He basically did my science fair. And the science fair, like, my project was like a solution for the Exxon Valdez oil spill. And it was about, the premise was like, if that boat had 2 hulls, if it was a double hull boat designed just like this, there probably wouldn't have been an oil spill. But it was like, my dad was like, okay, all you gotta do is put 2 hulls and bing, bang, bang, no oil spill. But I was like in 3rd grade. And it was also written my dad's kind of crude English. And, but hilariously, I went to the LA County Science Fair with my dad's science project. And I was like awarded like 3rd place for my age grade, like my age range. And so just I grew up with a very like supportive father, and then I decided to throw it all away and study poetry in college and become a comedian, and he still loved me after that. So that says a lot about the man. Yeah.
So what comes up for me, Chris, when I listen to you, and I maybe in front of some of the people who are new to see you right now, but you have this way of being able to bring these stories of your past to life in this really comedic way. Do you think your life, is it funnier than other people's lives, or is it that's your skill as a comedian? You know what I mean? I'm really curious. Do you think everyone's life is as funny as your life, the way you're able to talk about it, but you've like honed this skill or this perspective?
I don't know if it's funnier. I just know I've been in a lot of funny situations. Like, having to lie to a nun to go to a school is a pretty funny situation, Like, we also lied about where we live so I can go to a nice high school, and my dad was out of a job at the time, and he was convinced us because his English was not good enough. So he joined the adult ESL, English as a second language, at my new high school with me. So I actually went to high school with my father, and his homeroom was directly across from my homeroom. You know, I don't know if that makes me any funnier, but that's the type of terrible situation that makes a good comedy. You know what I mean?
So that's the key. The key is to be, and maybe there's something, you know, when you're with people who don't speak the language as well, like you're saying, there's some of these, or that maybe there's situations that are just
immigration is funny. Like they're doing America for the first time. They don't know what they're doing. They came here for me. I was a dumb, not good student as a kid, so they had put pressure on me, and I was like, all of us were like, I don't know, and so it just leads to kind of a lot of hijinks, you know. And it's just I think comedy is funny when the stakes are high, and there's not a lot of higher stakes in refugees coming to the United States, you know.
Well, I mean, I would say stakes. I mean, when you described, I didn't know about your dad's background about the camps. You know, that's real. That's real heavy, and what a horrible story. But then, you know, in terms of high stakes, you know, I mean, end of life is something that we all face, but yet you have found a way, and you found humor in that, in a perspective that carries with it so much love and humor in the same, almost from one beat to the next. How have you found the levity in that experience with your dad's disease? And
I found the levity out of necessity and out of survival, because I don't think there is a choice. You either let the grief or the sadness overcome you, or, you know, I just think funny things happen, and it's a way to humanize someone that's dying. You know, for example, some of you know who have listened to me before, but for the newcomers, my dad, he had Alzheimer's disease, which he had for 10 years, from around 2007 to 2017. And it was on top of all the other things that my dad had gone through, to have to experience that was pretty difficult. I mean, it's a hard situation on a family. Some of you may know that from having family members suffer from Alzheimer's or any type of disease, and especially one as long as that one. Alzheimer's is a long and treacherous road. But along that road, there were little bumps along the way that were just completely hilarious. And to find those moments and just allow yourself to be in those moments when they happen was just a real blessing. Like, my mother and I have always been close, but we became closer because of this situation. And we shared a lot. You know, we shared everything. We shared stories and what we were feeling and processing through what was going on with my dad. And one day, she called, and my dad had been in a nursing home at this point. She, you know, she told me, she was like, and I've told you this before, she was like, so Papi was very horny today. And I was like, no, please don't talk about this. And she was like, I can't tell people at church. You have to listen. And I was like, fine. She's like, Papi was very horny. He picked me up. He pushed me against the wall. He was about to kiss me, and he stopped himself, and he said, I don't know if I can do this. I have a wife and 2 kids. And so my dad tried to cheat on my mom with my mom, but he didn't do it because he's a gentleman. And he has a type, which are, you know, 4'8" Cuban ladies is his thing, but he didn't do anything about it. But that, to be able to laugh in that moment brought such a humanity back to our lives and our family, that was just beautiful. You know, like, it was just like, I just wanted to live in it, and you have to accept these things. And it was just like, oh, Dad, and like, it felt like he was still there because we just had this, you don't get any more of a present moment than laughing. When you're laughing for a reason. You're reacting to a thing that's happening in the moment. And so, and being in the present moment is everything. I mean, that's kind of one of the keys to happiness, I believe, is to kind of just be completely present, and to be able to laugh like that. It was just so cathartic. And so being able to do that all the way was pretty much saved us. And I think it helps that my mom and dad had always kind of been funny from the beginning, but just accepting that these funny things were happened were just, total game changers for us. Yeah. And it's good. I feel like it's necessary to remind people, like, because these terrible things and even what's going on right now with this pandemic and injustices around the world is that we can't allow these things to define us. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like sometimes it's very easy just to become saddened or paint ourselves as victims or whatever it's going on, but we can't, like, my dad's life was not marked by being in a concentration like camp in Cuba. It's not defined by Alzheimer's. It's defined by love, and those are the things that we really kind of have, I feel like, to really focus on. And I think that's one of the things that laughter helps us, like, remind us of,
So why don't you share, maybe you could just share when you think of something funny that makes you fill up with joy, when you think of around that hard time, what comes to mind for you that when you think of it?
I mean, they're so funny. And some of these stories are so dark because of the subject matter. Like, my mom and dad, my dad was in a home and he was convinced that this other woman was my mother. This woman was around the same height, and my dad started acting as if it was my mother. So my mom would go visit my dad like she did every day. And my mom would go visit my dad, and my dad would be holding this other woman's hand, and he'd turn to my mom and be like, please just leave us alone. I'm trying to have a good time with my wife, right? And which is so heartbreaking. And then months later, my mom calls me and she was like, and the other woman had the same name as my mom. She was like, oh, remember the other lady? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, she died. And I was like, oh my gosh, Mom, I'm so sorry to hear that. And she was like, that's what that bitch gets. And so, which is so brutal. There was another person, but it was just so funny. Just the jealousy, that Latin fire that my mom has for my dad is just so, it's just so relentless and funny. And yeah, I mean, there's tons of other stories that are just all around. Like, they're just so funny. Like, this is another dark thing, but like, and perhaps this is oversharing, but the first time I changed my father's diaper, it's a moment I'll never forget, because as a grown man, your life goes full circle from this man used to change my diaper, now I'm changing his diaper, and I opened his diaper. He has the biggest penis I've ever seen in my whole life. It was so big that I was like, what the hell is this? I was like, I wasn't even grossed out that I was changing a diaper. I was like, did I get mom's penis? Did I get a 4'8" woman's penis? What is this? And it was like, you know how hard it is to help someone when you are resenting them so much in the moment, and you could only laugh. You could only laugh at that. And like, that doesn't get any more dark than those two things, but they were, if you really think about it, they're so funny.
Well, it all
two very dark stories, I know,
no.
But we're talking about death here.
We're going there.
We're going there, and I will happily go there because I don't know. There's humor everywhere if we let it.
So that's, so you've, over the last couple of years, you've been on this journey. Well, you've been telling jokes about, it's a big part of your comedy and who you are. Does it get old? You're like, I need new material on a different subject matter. Like, how do you think about this, about your own career and being defined or through this or not, or, how do you relate to this material of yours?
I just I'm not one of those comics or one of those people that talks about like, what if there's a TV show, there's like Cheers on the moon or something. Like, I've just like always dealt with process what's going on in my life as it happens, And so after my dad passed away, I was like, I'm done talking about my dad. I'm done talking about my dad. I'm done talking about death. And so I'd go on stage and I'd be like, I was at the bank today And, and I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I'm not like an observational humor guy. I'm a guy who talks about his family. And so I've continued to talk about it just because I've talked about my father from the very beginning. Last month was my 15-year anniversary of doing stand-up comedy. I started in San Francisco, and in my first sets, I talked about my parents. And they were bad. When you start comedy, they're so bad, and my jokes were bad, but they were my topic, and like I would be like, I watched Scarface with my dad the other day, and I was like, "What'd you think, Dad?" And he was like, "I couldn't understand a word the guy said," just dumb jokes about going for it. But it's just, I mean, it's what I talk about. It's the sea that I swim in, and so it's still what I talk. It's still what I talk about. It's just what I know the best. And as a comedian or any type of artist, you want to do things that are unique to you that no one else can take from you. Like I really love Neil Young. I love Neil Young so much, and his sound is so unique to Neil Young. Yes, he sounds like a ghost in a flannel shirt. He's got a great show. But there's only one Neil Young, and when you hear a Neil Young song, you know it's Neil Young. And I think that's something that all artists should aspire to. And so I think talking about my family in the way that I do sometimes it's really funny and zany, and sometimes it's sad and tender. But that's what I do. That's what I do, and that's what's special and interesting to me.
And then I have a lot more questions, but I'm just curious, is that how, when you're off in your own personal life, are you the same? Are you telling stories about, are stories come naturally? Are you like, when you go out to dinner with your wife,
I just kind of sit there and I don't say anything for the duration of dinner, but I just kind of sit there and I just kind of stare at the food. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm a story. I just tell stories, and it's just kind of who I if something just happened that was funny that I experienced, I'll just tell that story. And so I think at the beginning of my career, everyone's just learning how to tell jokes, and then finally I kind of caught up to who I was as just like a person who talks about their lives. But and just reminisce on old stories and old funny things that happened. Like I was thinking about the other day how I grew up in not a great neighborhood, and but I had a slumber party with a couple friends, and we wanted to teepee a house, which we had done with friends who lived in Westchester in junior high, which is a nicer neighborhood. And my dad caught wind. We were going to sneak out, and my dad was like, he pulled me aside and he's like, "Chris, it's too dangerous to go TPing here. So I'm going to come with you." So then my dad came to make sure we were safe, and he came and he TP'd a house with us. And he would be like, and we were like trying to TP, and and he's like, "You have to unroll the toilet paper so that it'll fly." Like he like taught us how to do it. And he really brought all the fun out of it, because it's, the part of TPing his house is that it's mischief and you're doing something that's bad. And my dad kind of ruined it. But I just look back on all these little funny stories, and that's what I like to talk about.
Do you think your dad had ever TP'd before?
It seemed, for being from an island where toilet paper is so scarce, it seemed like he had done it before. I don't know where he learned, but all Cubans are like MacGyver. He probably did it with banana leaves or something. Who knows? Who knows? He makes do. But
entire house with banana leaves.
Yeah.
Oh man. So as someone then who talks about their family and what's going on in your life, why don't you just give us an update about your life? I mean, we're in this there's so much going on, obviously, so much stillness, but also so much pain and so much, how's this quarantine, this virus, this period of American history been for you over these last this year?
Well, I it's pretty hard on everybody. It feels like it's been very tough. Some things have been tough, like my mom has been isolated, which is tough. I get tested and visit her from time to time. But the hardest things are not being able to see loved ones. and friends. You know, I don't care about stand-up big picture. I haven't been on stage in 5 months, which is the longest I've gone without doing stand-up, but who cares about that right now? You know, like,
This is sit down humor.
yeah, this is sit down. This is Zoom
Sorry.
humor.
See, that's where I
That's what
failed.
we're talking.
I'm
You
sorry.
almost went the whole time, Brad. You went 40 minutes without trying to tell a joke, and looks what happened. Well, appropriately, it died. It died on impact. So that's good.
At least I'm on the theme. At least I'm on the theme.
At least you're on theme. You know, I've just been trying to stay positive. I'm home with my wife. We're having a baby, so that's the new news. My wife is pregnant. And that was our plan to do this year anyway. And we thought about it and we knew what was going on, and we just didn't want to let this affect us. I mean, my parents had my sister in the middle of the harshest parts of the Castro regime, you know, and my sister rules and my parents are awesome. So I didn't want to let this situation dictate our lives. And so this is funny. Speaking of sharing things from my life and situations, we decided to start trying pretty much at the beginning of this pandemic, at the beginning of lockdown. And so we went for it. As you say, we started the process. And on one night, we knew that she had been ovulating, you know, because of science or whatever. And we did it, and it was a good one. We had a good time. If we would say we had a very lovely time. And when we finished, we were like, that was awesome. And we finished at 7:59 p.m. and we just kind of laid there. And at 8 o'clock, the entire neighborhood started clacking pots and pans and celebrating for the first responders. When people were doing, everyone was like, whoa! And we were both like, that was a baby. I think we're going to be okay. I think people are rooting for us. And that was it. And then next thing you know, she was pregnant. And so it felt like even though it's a scary time to do something like this, but I was like, okay, well, that's a good sign. I think at least the neighborhood has our back, you know? I think so. So that's a new thing. So now it's my turn to be a dad, which we don't have any kids. And so I'm excited about that and kind of pay that forward. I was given a really great roadmap from my parents. And so I'm just excited to be a dad, you know? I think it'll be really cool.
What are you most looking forward to about fatherhood?
Just the abundance of love that I am anticipating. I love my wife so much, and we have such a great relationship, and I'm excited to share that with a little one and bring them into this world where there's all this stuff going on. I know there's all this stuff going on, and it seems like chaos sometimes at the moment, but I know within these walls that she will be in a beautiful, nurturing situation. So I'm excited to do that, like my parents did to my sister. You know, it was absolute mayhem where they were when she was a kid, and like they did for me. So, you know, I don't come from a family with a lot of riches or money and stuff like that, but we do have this beautiful foundation of kind of relentless love. And so I'm excited to pay that forward. I think I feel like I will probably, I still feel a living relationship with my dad, but I feel like this will be a cool experience to become a father myself.
Yeah. As someone who's talked so much about fatherhood and fathers, it would be so cool to, honestly, I'm so happy for you to be one.
Thanks. And
yourself.
honestly, I need the material, so that's good.
Well, that's what Jackie's saying. Jackie wrote a comment saying having a child will give you lots of more material.
I hope so. If not, we're putting her back. We're throwing her back.
That would give you more material. That's the whole other thing. I think. So you know it's a girl. It sounds like.
Yeah, it's a girl.
And do you have a name picked out?
I'm gonna tell you strangers whatever name we're making up now. Actually, we're naming her Brad. We're naming her Brad. We're going with, we're not letting gender get into the way of this. We're going with Brad. We've talked about it, but it's honestly, it's a little difficult. So we're going back and forth, and I feel like my wife and I have never been more contentious as when we're trying to name this child. where we'll just shoot. I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but you just shoot down the other person's idea if you don't like it as viciously as possible. Like she likes these kind of old, she likes, like, she was like, what about clementine? And I was like, what are we giving birth to citrus? No, not good. And so back and forth, we're being ruthlessly mean about trying to, we signed up for this app where it's like Tinder for baby names. So we get to kind of swipe on names that we agree on. But
Is that real?
yeah, there's a thing where it's like, but I don't know. I'm not into it, but I'm sure we'll come up with a nice.
I feel like that's like most people who use Tinder.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that's exciting. And what is your mom, how's she feeling about all this?
I was like, Mom, we're pregnant. She was like, I know. I was like, how'd you know? I was like, I just figured. And then when we told her it was a girl, I was like, Mom, it's a girl. And she was like, I wanted a boy. So what can you do? Like, my mom is just so viciously herself. But she is very excited. And, she's has such a funny, she's boundaryless. That's one way to say it. It's one thing I talked to my therapist about, my mom's boundaries. But no, we told her, and then I went to call other family members, and they're like, yeah, your mom told us. So my mom has decided she told everyone first. But I think it's just because she's just so excited. She is excited to be, I mean, she's a grandma 3 times over, but that's not enough for an older Latina lady. She needs more grandkids. And so she is very quick to tell me that.
So first of all, if anyone out there has any questions for Chris, we're kind of near the end. And if anyone has any burning question you want me to ask Chris, now would be your moment in the sun to put it in the chat so I can turn to it. We are getting some good, I don't know. Also, yeah, if you have any baby name suggestions, I feel like Chris has probably picked the top name from the list.
I will definitely delete any baby name suggestion. Oh, those are cute names though. I like Willa is such a beautiful name. It's very, like Willa Cather. That's a very classy name. And then there's, Selena Jennifer Lopez. Okay, that's another one. That's a lot of celebrities in there. That's cool.
Oh man. So we're trying to reimagine. Okay, we're getting more suggestions. How about Miriam?
It's a nice name. I'll add it to the list. Alan, Alana. Okay,
so that's like Brad, and you can do the girls version of that name too. Like,
yeah.
I don't know what it is, but you always kind of grow up thinking like, oh, for you it was easier, like Chris and Christina.
Yeah.
For me, it's always been hard to find the feminine version.
Braid.
Oh, Bradgelina, that's nice. Thanks.
Bradgelina, that's good.
Thanks.
I see a question in here from Sinead Gilman. Hi, Sinead. Thanks for your question. Question for Chris: what advice would you give someone who recently lost a parent? I don't know. I know this is such an individual journey, but one thing that I really allowed myself to do that was helpful is just, I was very easy to let myself feel however I wanted to feel. Like, grief is so, grief comes and goes, and I don't think it ever really truly goes away. But to kind of be gentle with yourself, with the relationship you have with your parent, because it's easy to look back and be like, I should have done this, or I could have done that. Why did I say this? But there's no point to that anymore. I think just be gentle with yourself and be gentle with the person that you lost and your family members, and just, focus on the lovely moments. That to me, that was the thing. So I have this podcast, Scattered, and through the podcast, I was able to, even though my dad had passed away, I was able to kind of keep him alive by learning more about his life that I hadn't known. I had talked about him so much on stage my entire life, and then after he passed, I realized there's a lot of questions I had about him. So in the podcast, I've kind of explore his life and some really hard and terrible truths, like the fact that he was in a camp and some other situations that he was in that were really dark that I had never known about. But learning about his life in a way it kept him alive, but also made me appreciate all the things that he had gone through and had done for me. Because I mean, he kept a lot of things that, a lot of hardships that he had away from me, and I understand why. But it also it kind of fills me with so much gratitude, to know that all the things he went through, you know. So I've just personally, I just focused on the good things, and even when you learn about bad things, it always goes back to kind of gratitude with me.
Love it. I want to get to these other, if we can almost rapid fire, but with enough, just time it perfectly is what I'm asking. Are there any subjects you will not joke about on stage?
Sure. I mean, it's so funny because I talk about, I don't know. I mean, I talk about pretty revealing things in my life. But I don't know. I don't see, it's weird because wouldn't talk about sports on stage unless it was like relative to a story or something, but I'm pretty open to talk about anything, you know. If it's too private or it'll hurt someone in my family's feelings, I probably won't do it.
That's nice. That's a good quality.
Yeah. So that's something I probably won't. If it's something too personal to my wife or her family or my family or anything like that, if it hurts them or is something that brings them shame or something, I probably won't talk about it. Yeah.
Now, this next one looks like I see Jim, and it strikes me that might be my dad, honestly, asking a question. How critical, and maybe this is about me.
Jim's question is, what Brad's problem? Your guess is as good as mine, Jim. I don't know.
But it's similar. It's related to that. How critical of yourself are you after a set? Do you spend time reflecting on the set, and are you usually hard on yourself?
I'm always hard on myself. I think personally, that's how I've gotten good at this. I am constantly criticizing myself, and it could be a nightmare, just to be fully honest. And sometimes it's difficult when I talk about things that are so personal and put them out there and it doesn't go well. It's challenging,
yeah,
but
you take it hard. It's real. It's who you are.
But it's who I am. So it's like, well, these people hate me and my life. And so, but that's kind of the tax you pay to be a artist and put yourself out there. So
an honest artist, because there's like the band Kiss, they dress. Is that really who Kiss is? They're wearing costumes and wearing masks. Like, you don't have a mask on. You're going full naked Chris.
I do have an 8-inch tongue that I do reveal between jokes sometimes, and I wear a huge Frankenstein boots. That's the real me. What if on stage I was like, "Hi, I'm a normal-looking guy," and then I come home and I'm like, "Well, it's time to rock!" If it was like the backwards persona, I wear a star on my face. Yeah.
Oh man, that just made me sweaty. Okay. Let's see. We're getting down to the. We have enough time to answer these questions, I feel. I don't. Okay. Does your dad ever? This is one I've experienced myself, right? Does your dad ever? Not with your dad. I haven't dreamed about your dad, but does your dad ever talk to you in your dreams? And if so, what does he say?
Yeah, my dad comes up in my dreams all the time. My mom says she dreams with my dad every night, which to me is wild. But they were together for a very long time. Yeah, my dad pops in and out. Sometimes he's just hanging out and there's no words going on. Sometimes, something, when I was trying to convince my mother to scatter his ashes along the coast of Cuba, which is his dying wish, I had a lot of kind of surreal dreams of following him around Cuba where he would kind of disappear and like, it was like I was, like a detective following a ghost or something like that. And so that was, just a reflection of what I was thinking about during the day, is really trying to get my dad back to Cuba and how kind of eerie it is and stuff. But from time to time, I'll still dream about him. Sometimes it's sad. Sometimes I'll wake up crying in the middle of the night, which is sad, Sometimes just little things will remind me of them, and it'll be tough. But I realize it's almost a blessing. It's so lucky that I have this connection to this person who's been gone for 3 years, but still in my heart and popping in my dreams,
Can we do a speed round, Chris, to try to get to the answers to these questions? I don't know
Sure.
if a speed round if that's
Veronique,
possible.
Veronique, how do you like Sarah Cooper? Oh, Sarah Cooper is a genius. She's so funny. She does the TikToks where she lip syncs Trump's speeches, and I think it's so funny. And there's still room for innovation outside of regular stand-up for sure. I mean, people are doing really funny things on TikTok and Zoom and stuff like that. And I think it's a necessity for comedy to evolve away from stand-up and become something new. That's how it stays alive. Stand-up is, it's kind of an old art form at this time. It's kind of archaic. So I'm excited for it to change.
How'd you meet your wife?
We were coworkers. We worked at a stand-up comedy website together in San Francisco, and we sat right next to each other.
Is she? I mean, I'm sure she's funny, but was she a comedian as well? Is she?
She's not a comedian, but she's very funny. She's the funniest person once you close the door and everyone leaves. She's like, "What's wrong with that asshole?" She's just really kind of, she's very quick and very funny. Yeah, she's a very funny person.
Wow, this is a really sweet question from Pedro, just to say, I mean, it's more of a statement than a question. Do you know that after Scattered, your podcast, your mother almost became kind of an adoptive mother of all of us who listen to the podcast? We love her.
Oh, that's really sweet. I think is this Pedro from the DR? I think Pedro from Dominican Republic? Thank you, Pedro. My mom, if you listen to the podcast, she's just a special person. And anyone that she comes across in her life, she's like kind of a mythical character, and she's really sweet, and she's very funny and larger than life. So I'll tell my mom you said that, Pedro, and it'll make her feel nice. So thank you for sharing. She's a real special lady.
So I just want to, before we close, I just want to make sure that people know how to follow you. Because following Chris is something you should definitely be doing. Here's his Twitter handle, Twitter @_Chris Garcia. His Instagram is @radtuna. And we wrote the word link. We said listen to his podcast Scattered, and then it says link underlined. The link you can't just click on that button. But it's called Scattered. Search for it, and it's in the top 10 awards of best podcasts from last year, and you should definitely listen. And it's incredible. Next week in this series, we have an amazing duo, Mandolin Orange. They're a very well-known folk duo that you're going to be blown away by. They're very popular musicians who I've came across after they got booked for the show, and I'm realizing they're like kind of a huge band who's written a lot of their material about these themes, and we're very grateful to have them here with us next Wednesday. So please join us for the last scheduled episode anyway of this series. And just so we have that date next Wednesday at 5 p.m. For those of you who know somebody who is suffering, needs to plan a memorial service for somebody, perhaps, but in a socially distanced way, we've created virtualmemorialguide.org. With free resources and tools to help anyone who's in that circumstance deal with a remote service in this really challenging moment. And please check out our website, letsreimagine.org, for all these events you can find. And if you want to support us, letsreimagine.org/support. I want to close by bringing Chris back here. Let's see where you at. There you are, my friend. So Chris, I mean, we have this community here that we're working to build. We're working to help change this conversation in this country around death and dying, and how we respond using our creative means, and trying to bolster the idea that there could be a community out there that can explore death differently but can embrace life. What advice do you have for those out in this community? So you're a comedian, right? And this show's Art Responders, and you're super talented. You're hard on yourself. You make incredible jokes. That all that hardness on yourself has obviously paid off into just such and just who you are as a human. But for those of us who don't have a superpower of a comedian to be able to write jokes like this, or what advice do you have for people who want to process this type of these things in our life around these subject matters, who maybe say, I can't do this?
Um, well, great question. No, I would say-
Finally.
well, all you got to do, is I have a, what if I just went into an infomercial? There's like how to process grief in 10 easy steps. 5 simple payments of $8.99. It's a subscription service. I found it nice to do something creative with it. The way I did it was with comedy and through this podcast. But I've also done stuff like organize family photos. It was also very therapeutic for me to go to Cuba as a family with my mom and sister and scatter my dad's ashes and meet his family in Cuba, and just tell stories about him and stuff. And it's doing something creative, whether it's just putting together a photo album or listening to music that reminded. So art and creativity is so personally something so dear to me. So just finding a creative outlet, or just even, putting a mixtape together of songs, just something about art that to me is so therapeutic that might be helpful to someone else. Whether you don't have to start a podcast or do a one-person show. I think, I don't know. It was very helpful for me to do something creative though. And yeah, I don't know if that really answers the question.
I think it does. I mean, it answers it for me. I don't know if it answers it for everyone else, but I think that's really sweet. I mean, honestly, we are trying to, I think the point is, and that's, I guess maybe it was a leading question in some ways, but I didn't know what you were going to say, but we're hoping that people realize that everyone out there is creative in some form or fashion. You can make a mixtape, that's creative. And by doing something small that's actionable, by creating something, bringing it into the world in the way that, there's nothing to say that mixtape is not as good as Chris's comedy.
It's true. You could do anything like that. It's helped to, put a little piece on the headstone, as I say in the podcast. It's just do something.
So we're at the top, Chris. I mean, we're ending right now. Do you have any jokes with punchlines? Just like a quick, just to go out on a joke.
I think they all had punchlines.
I mean, a short.
Okay. Have any jokes with podcasts? It doesn't seem like it. You're putting me on the spot. I don't.
Maybe you don't do that. That's what I'm wondering. What. I'm not gonna make a joke to show you what I.
Yeah, let's. I'm waiting for you. Let's see.
How about this? Why don't we just get everyone off mute and everyone can just say bye to Chris, and thank you everyone for being there. If you can share your gratitude. Okay, I'm seeing things about fathers' penises, but if you want to share your gratitude in the chat.
Yay! Thank you. I loved it.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Chris, and Reimagine, and I got Tara there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're inspirational. Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh gosh, thank you. Everybody,
thank you to Chris for being here. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, the Reimagine team, for making this possible. Stacy for a great job. Carrie, Dara, Gabrielle, Cole, and to all of you out there for joining us. And again, thank you to Chris Garcia. Follow his career. We hope to be with him again, and keep laughing, everyone.
Yay!
Bye. Thanks, everybody. Take good care.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank